Throughout recorded history, walls and other barriers have served a single function: to divide, to separate. This is true whether walls are built to keep people out or to keep them imprisoned. The wall being constructed on the West Bank by the Israeli government is no different. 25 feet high, studded with guard towers and armaments, and encrusted with high-tech sensors, the wall cuts across the land, separating Palestinians from their own farms, their own neighbors, and from the Israeli settlements which have sprung up rapidly as a result of lavish subsidies from the Israeli government. In November of 2003, Professor James Rauch of the University of California, San Diego, explained how the political climate in Israel led to the building of the wall.
The Israeli public has been clamoring for a separation wall between Israel and the West Bank for some time. The reason is that there is a wall now, or at least a fence, between Israel and the Gaza Strip, and that is generally credited with keeping out terrorists in the Gaza Strip from infiltrating Israel proper. So the idea in most people's minds was, let's build a fence or separation wall along the 1967 boundary between Israel and the West Bank, and this will also keep terrorists from the West Bank out of Israel, much as the barrier between the West Bank, the barrier between Israel and the Gaza Strip has kept people out of Israel. As things have turned out, the wall hasn't been built along the 1967 boundary. Rather, the wall has been built along the boundaries for the Palestinian state that were proposed in the Camp David agreements. Not exactly, but very roughly along those boundaries. So it's been built entirely on the Palestinian side of the 67 border, which has meant confiscation of Palestinian land, and in some places, in particular to take in the settlement of Ariel, the wall has cut very deeply into the Palestinian territories. There is also an eastern section of the wall being proposed and partly started, which will cut off the Palestinian cities from the Jordan Valley region, and that will implement the part of the Camp David Accords which stated that the Jordan Valley region was going to remain under indefinite Israeli military control. So in effect, the wall would unilaterally implement the Camp David proposals back from 2000.
Coming up. Tear down the wall, why Roger Waters wants Israel's security barrier to come down.
What fills me with horror, the thought of being, constrained by something like this is horrific. It's like living in a giant prison.
It was an iconic film, an iconic album, The Wall by 70s supergroup Pink Floyd. But never before has it been performed like this. An extraordinary concert by Roger Waters, the man who wrote the original piece, close to the real wall that now separates Israelis from Palestinians. He's called for it to be torn down in the name of peace. But as our Middle East correspondent Julian Mannion exclusively reports, not everyone thought his message hit the right note.
It's been a rock anthem since the 1970s, but this week it became a rallying call for protest against the Israeli government's treatment of the Palestinians. Roger Waters wrote Another Brick in the Wall for his legendary band Pink Floyd. Now he played it in front of thousands of Israeli rock fans. The new message about the wall Israel is building to fence off the Palestinians. Israel calls it a security fence and says it's needed to protect its people from suicide bombers. The Palestinians say it's a land grab and splits their communities. For rock veteran Roger Waters, the wall has become a cause. In Bethlehem, he made his symbolic protest, and he told me that he was shocked by what he saw.
What fills me with horror, the thought of being, you know, constrained by something like this is horrific. It's like living in a giant prison, isn't it? I mean, it literally is like living in a giant prison.
You believe it should simply be taken down?
I don't know. Well, yeah, I don't think there's any question.
I may be speaking out of turn, but I believe that we, the rest of the world, need this generation of Israelis to tear down the walls.
The thousands of young Israelis seem to love the music, but not all of them liked the message.
I think if the wall was taken down, people in Israel will die.
We know there should be peace. I want peace too, and I'm willing to make a sacrifice for it. But I think that coming here with such a shallow message, I think it's doing wrong for both people, Israelis and Palestinians.
Roger Waters chose to hold this concert next to a small mixed community called the Oasis of Peace, where Arabs and Israelis live side by side. But for all the enthusiasm of the Israeli audience, it's doubtful if he's managed to change many minds about the conflict with the Palestinians. Julian Mannion, ITV News, at the Peace Oasis concert in Israel.
A suicide bomber from the Jenin area.
And earlier Sunday, a suicide bomb attack killed or wounded scores of people.
Incredible, utter destruction wrought by just one person.
Palestinian gunmen opened fire on a minibus carrying the teachers to their school.
At least 10 people have died. Suicide bomber came onto the bus where it himself had exploded.
A Palestinian man set off explosives attached to his body.
Gunmen opened fire, killing 2 Israelis, including a 7-month-old baby.
This was the trigger. 20 killed and 100 injured as they sat down to a Passover supper that they would never finish. The 27-year-old Palestinian suicide bomber who did this not only destroyed lives, he also struck a fatal blow to the peacemaking efforts of the United States.
Terror is a crime against humanity. The fence now under construction is meant to provide protection from Palestinian terror attacks, attacks against which the Palestinian Authority has consistently refused to act, attacks that have caused and continue to cause horrific bloodshed. With murderous suicide bombings on the rise since October 2000, Israel's government saw the need to erect a fence that could prevent the murderers from reaching their targets. Had the Palestinian leadership abided by its pledge to act against terror, there would never have been a need for a fence. It's just a 15-minute walk from the Palestinian city of Qalqilia to the Israeli city of Kfar Saba. Just 15 minutes. In some places, just 12 kilometers separate the route of the fence from the Mediterranean Sea. In the long run, by preventing terrorism, the fence will actually encourage dialogue with the Palestinians, no longer hampered by the influence of terrorists determined to destroy the peace process. The numbers speak for themselves. Not a single suicide bomber has gotten past the security fence built around the Gaza Strip. In those parts of the West Bank where the fence has been completed, terrorist activities have dropped by some 50%. Hundreds of people have been saved from injury and death. The Berlin Wall was built to stop people from fleeing to freedom. The security fence serves exactly the opposite purpose. It prevents terrorists from attacking innocent civilians. It's not a wall, it's a fence. In fact, just 20 kilometers of the total 730 planned, less than 3%, take the form of a wall. And that's only where the danger of shooting attacks requires a solid structure. Israel shares the same moral commitment of all democratic countries to enable its people to live in the truest sense of the word. Suicide attacks carried out in Israel have victimized both Jews and Arabs, men and women, senior citizens and small children from various ethnic and religious groups, tourists and permanent residents, foreign workers, and new immigrants. The security fence is meant to protect all of them. Yes, indeed. This fence is meant to separate people, to separate terrorist murderers from innocent civilians. There's a delicate equation here which forces us to weigh the right to freedom of movement against the right to life. Israel is doing everything possible to minimize the damage caused by the fence. It strives to ease the situation of civilians who feel that the fence impinges upon them. Yes, it's a security fence, but it's being built with maximum consideration for the needs of the Palestinian population. The fence will include 41 gates for farmers, 11 crossing points, and 5 terminals for the transfer of goods. Israel has replanted more than 63,000 olive trees for Palestinian farmers to ensure their livelihood despite construction of the fence. All Palestinian civilians are free to lodge formal complaints and to appeal any decisions made. Israel makes every attempt to take such complaints into account. While focused on the prevention of terror attacks, Israel stands ready to consider changing the route of the fence wherever it disrupts the lives of Palestinian civilians. The few landowners affected by the construction of the fence have been offered compensation for their lands and for their harvests of the next 5 years, while they retain legal ownership of their property. This fence is for security, so it must follow a route that ensures security. The green line is not a security line. It's a political line. The fence is not a border. Final borders will be determined only through negotiations. The fence is meant to serve one and only one purpose: to prevent terrorists from carrying out murderous attacks in buses, schools, and restaurants.